feller told me one time they got a weed down here and they call it a loco weed. When the horses and cows eat it, they get wilder than all get out.
Dirk Blocker was just 14 when his father died suddenly in 1972. For 53 years, he kept his feelings locked away. Now, at 67, Dan Blocker's son is talking, and fans can't believe what they're hearing. The Brooklyn Nine-Nine actor reveals how Bonanza's fame affected their family life. The mob of fans everywhere they went, the missed childhood moments. The truth behind his own acting career. His words paint a picture nobody expected from Hoss Cartwright's quiet son. Dan Blocker came into the world on December 10, 1928, in DeKalb, Texas. And he didn't arrive quietly. He weighed 14 pounds at birth, so big that he set a record in Bowie County. His name was even recorded wrong on his birth certificate months later. Instead of Bobby Dan Davis Blocker, the doctor wrote Bobby Don. His mother, Mary, surely endured one of the most painful births in town history, and his father, Shaq, had no idea that this massive baby would one day be a giant on American TV. People didn't forget that birth. For years, locals talked about how no one else had broken that 14-pound record, until very recently. When Dan was 6, the family moved to O'Donnell, a small farming town in West Texas. They were grieving. Just a year before, Dan's older sister Virginia had died of pneumonia at age 11. Dan was 5 when it happened. The loss hit the family hard, but life had to move on. Shaq opened a grocery store, and they lived in the back of it. Dan played behind the warehouse, and by 5th grade, he was bagging groceries and hauling 40-pound cattle feed sacks for customers. The town had about 3,000 people back then, 2 lumber yards, 2 drugstores, and 2 doctors. Dan was part of that world, not just as the shopkeeper's kid, but as someone everyone knew. His size made him unforgettable, but his hard work made people respect him. Dan didn't just grow tall, he grew fast. By the time he was 10, he stood 5 feet tall and weighed 105 pounds. By age 12, he was 6 feet and 200 pounds. He wasn't just bigger than the other kids, he was bigger than many of the grown men. In fact, he worked with them, on grain trucks, on elevators, wherever heavy lifting was needed. People in town even roped off Main Street on Saturday nights so Dan could box with older boys. By 13, he was taking on guys in their 20s. He never lost. There's even a story that he once lifted a car off a man when it fell off a jack. Whether it's true or not, nobody doubted he could do it. By high school, he was 6 feet 4 inches, weighed 275 pounds, and wore size 14.5 shoes. His dad used to joke that Dan was too big to ride and too small to pull a wagon, not much use at all. But that size would soon make him a star. When Dan was 12, his parents enrolled him in the Texas Military Institute in San Antonio. They probably hoped the discipline would shape him into something more than just a big body. That same school had once trained General Douglas MacArthur. Dan learned structure, toughness, and focus. All of it would serve him well later. After TMI, in 1946, he joined Hardin-Simmons University. He played football there. With his size, he was a natural. He was 18 years old and built like a tank, strong, fast, and respected by teammates. But football wasn't where his story would take a turn. That happened at Sul Ross State. He transferred there in 1947 and signed up to help backstage in a school play. The show was arsenic and old lace, and they needed someone strong enough to carry fake dead bodies. Dan agreed, and something clicked. Moving those props, being around the actors, watching it all come together. It sparked something deep inside him. He suddenly saw a different path. He switched his major from physical education to drama. Just like that, the football player became an actor. At Sul Ross, Dan kept playing football, but theater became his world. He worked odd jobs. He performed in rodeos and bounced at bars just to pay for school. On stage, he found purpose. He had the size for physical roles, but people were surprised by how gentle and expressive he was. His teachers noticed. His classmates cheered him on. In 1950, he graduated with a degree in speech and drama. Everyone thought he'd go into sports. Instead, he picked something harder, something with no guarantees. Offers came in from professional football teams. Boxing promoters called too. But Dan said no. He didn't want to make a living with his fists or just his size. He wanted more. He wanted art. That same year, 1950, he moved to Boston for summer stock theater. It was 2,000 miles from Texas, and he didn't know a soul. But he took the risk. He acted in weekly plays. He worked for little money. He learned lines fast and played many roles. It was exhausting, but it was everything he wanted. Dan Blocker thought he was on the path to becoming an actor in Boston, but life had other plans. In November 1950, the United States Army called him up. The Korean War was heating up, and Blocker, who stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed over 250 pounds, was drafted. It wasn't easy outfitting a man that size. It took the Army a full month to find boots big enough for his size 14.5 feet. After basic training in Louisiana, Blocker was sent to Japan, then straight to the front lines of Korea in December 1951. He joined F Company, 2nd Battalion, 179th Infantry Regiment of the 45th Division. The soldiers there gave him a nickname right away, the Big Un. Combat came fast. His unit was dropped into freezing trenches along the Jamestown line, where snow, mud, and bullets filled the days. Blocker arrived as a private, but he didn't stay there long. His leadership stood out, and he was soon promoted to corporal, then sergeant, then master sergeant. All of it happened quickly. He didn't just follow orders, he led. In total, Blocker spent 209 days in active combat. Christmas Eve, 1951, brought one of his worst memories. Blocker and his squad got pinned down on Hill 255 for 10 hours. It was dark, freezing, and deadly. On May 25, 1952, things got even bloodier. While defending Hill 200, 6 Americans died, and 21 were wounded. But the unit also managed to take out 132 enemy soldiers. Blocker fought through ambushes and mortar blasts, and during one brutal battle, he was shot while trying to rescue his wounded friends. That act earned him a Purple Heart, but it also changed him. He had seen too much. After coming home, he spoke out against war, especially the Vietnam War. He was clear about it. He didn't want American bombs dropped on innocent people, not after what he had lived through. Still, the war showed something else about Blocker. He could lead under pressure. He helped plan and guide dangerous patrols in places like Pork Chop Hill and Old Baldy. One time, his squad walked right into an ambush. They were outnumbered and deep in enemy land. But instead of retreating, Blocker stayed calm and led the fight back. His huge frame helped him carry the wounded to safety, but it also made him a big target. Still, he never backed down. By the time his unit was rotated out in July 1952, he had earned a long list of honors: Combat Infantryman Badge, Korean Service Medal with 2 campaign stars, the Korean Presidential Unit Citation, and more. On September 24, 1952, his Army service ended. 2 days later, he married Dolphia Lee Parker, the woman he'd loved through the war. He had written her letters from Korea, and now they were finally together for good. They held a small ceremony in Carlsbad, New Mexico. That same week, Blocker went back to school at Sul Ross State Teachers College. He picked up right where he left off and earned his master's degree in drama. Acting was still the dream, but bills had to be paid. so he started teaching high school English and drama in Sonora, Texas. His students remembered how his deep voice echoed through the halls, especially when he read Shakespeare. After spending a year teaching in Sonora, Dan Blocker moved to Carlsbad, New Mexico. There, he became a sixth-grade teacher and also coached at Eddy Elementary School. Even while teaching, he never gave up on his love for acting. He used his classroom as a stage and kept his passion for drama alive. Then something unexpected happened. During a summer vacation, Blocker and his family took a trip from Sonora to Hollywood. It wasn't meant to be a job hunt. They were just on holiday. But fate had other plans. While Blocker was making a call at a phone booth, wearing full cowboy gear, heeled boots, a flashy shirt, and a huge straw hat, a talent agent noticed him. Blocker stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and looked like he had stepped out of a Western movie. The agent didn't need a script or audition, just one look, and he knew Blocker was made for television. Meanwhile, Blocker's wife and kids waited in their station wagon, completely unaware that their lives were about to change forever. It was the perfect setup. Hollywood in the late 1950s was full of cowboy shows, and Blocker looked like the real deal. His Texas roots, his size, and that rugged charm, it was exactly what producers were looking for. That random moment on the sidewalk turned into the beginning of something huge, but Blocker didn't move to California to become a star. In 1956, he moved to Los Angeles to earn a PhD in education from UCLA. He was serious about academics. While studying, he worked as a substitute teacher in Glendale schools to support his family. He had 4 kids, twin daughters Deborah Lee and Dana Lynn, born in 1953, followed by David in 1955, and Dirk in 1957. Life was busy. He was juggling classes, work, and fatherhood, but he managed to keep everything in balance. Dan Blocker didn't start out as a star. In 1957, he played a monster called the Goon in a Three Stooges short film called Outer Space Jitters. It was a goofy sci-fi comedy where he was credited as Don Blocker, not even by his real name. He was 6'4", weighed over 300 pounds, and wore a full alien costume. The movie was only 17 minutes long and shot in just 2 days, but it showed how early Blocker was already using his size to grab attention, even in something as silly as a Stooges skit. A year before that, in 1956, he showed up in The Sheriff of Cochise, playing a bartender. That was his television debut. He didn't stick to one role for long. In 1956, he appeared in Gunsmoke as a cavalry lieutenant. 2 years later, he came back to the same show in another role. By then, he had also appeared in Have Gun, Will Travel, and Colt .45, and in 1957 alone, he was popping up in multiple westerns. He was in The Rifleman, Cheyenne, and more, always playing tough men, outlaws, or enforcers. These parts weren't glamorous, but they got him noticed. People remembered the big guy with the strong voice. Then came Maverick. That show changed everything for him. He played a character named Hognose Hughes. Blocker later said it was the most important role of his early career. It was a Western, but Maverick wasn't like the others. It had humor, it was clever, and Blocker fit in perfectly. He wasn't just big, he was funny too. That's when casting directors and producers saw that he could mix charm with strength. The balance between comedy and drama would later define the character of Hoss Cartwright. But that discovery began with Hognose Hughes. In 1958, he got a recurring role in another Western, Cimarron City. He played Tiny Carl Budinger. The show didn't last long, only 1 season, but it led to a connection that would change his life. The producer of Cimarron City was David Dortort. He remembered Blocker from earlier work, including a part in The Restless Gun, where Blocker had played a blacksmith and, in another episode, a cattleman. Dortort liked what he saw, So when he started developing a new show about a family of ranchers set in the American West, he knew who he wanted. When the creators of Bonanza first started working on the show back in 1959, they weren't sure who would play most of the roles. But one thing was clear: Hoss Cartwright was written for Dan Blocker. The producers didn't even audition anyone else. They knew what they had. And they were right. The show started slow, sitting at number 45 in the ratings. But Blocker's performance helped turn things around. Slowly, the show climbed the charts. A few years later, it was the most watched show on American television. At first, Hoss wasn't meant to be a serious character. He was supposed to be the big slow guy, a joke, really. Someone who could punch hard but didn't say much. He was written as simple, even dim-witted. But Dan Blocker wasn't like that at all. He was 6'4" and weighed over 300 pounds, 365 by the later seasons. But behind that size was a man with a master's degree. He had taught English. He had planned to get a PhD, and he brought all of that to the role. Instead of playing Hoss as dumb, he played him as thoughtful, kind, full of heart. And the writers noticed. They started changing Hoss to match Blocker. He went from being comic relief to the soul of the show. By the third season, when Bonanza hit number 2 in the ratings, people had fallen in love with Hoss. He was more than muscle. He was the one with the moral compass, the one who reminded viewers what the Cartwrights were really fighting for. But behind the scenes, the show was brutal. Unlike modern TV shows that shoot 10 or 12 episodes, Bonanza was pumping out more than 30 episodes every year. That meant 5 days a week, 14 hours a day, almost non-stop. Dan Blocker had to show up at 7 in the morning and wouldn't leave until 9 at night. The heat, the costumes, the riding, the stunts, it was a lot. Especially for a man his size. Sometimes he would pass out from the heat, but he kept going. He once said he saw his TV family more than his real wife and 4 kids. And by the time 1972 rolled around, he had filmed 415 episodes. That kind of schedule would break most actors today. And what makes Blocker's story even more bittersweet is what he gave up. Long before Bonanza, he had big plans, not for fame, but for a future in education. After earning his master's degree in Texas, he was a teacher. He taught English and drama, even 6th graders. And when he moved to California, it wasn't for Hollywood. It was for UCLA. He wanted to earn a PhD. That was his real dream. Acting came by accident. Someone spotted him wearing a cowboy outfit and pulled him into the industry. And even after being cast in Bonanza, he didn't give up on school right away. In early interviews, he talked about juggling filming and classes. But eventually, it became impossible. Memorizing scripts, shooting all day, doing interviews, it consumed everything. By 1961, he put his studies on hold, and he never got the chance to go back. He later said not finishing his PhD was his biggest regret. Still, what he gave to television can't be ignored. Hoss wasn't just a cowboy with a big heart. He was a character who made people feel something real. By the mid-60s, studies showed viewers saw Hoss as the emotional core of Bonanza. Blocker once said he played Hoss with one quote in mind: "If there is any kindness we can show, let us do it now, for we will never pass this way again." And he meant it, on and off screen. At the height of the 1960s, one show ruled American television. Bonanza wasn't just popular. It was a national ritual. From 1964 to 1967, it was the #1 show in the country. Every Sunday night at 9 p.m., nearly 19 million households tuned in. That's a 36.3 rating share. In just a few seasons, it had jumped from 45th place to 2nd, and then to the top. For 9 straight years, Bonanza stayed in the top 5. No other show had done that. And it wasn't just America. The Cartwright family reached viewers in nearly 50 countries: Canada, Brazil, France, Thailand, even Saudi Arabia. It wasn't until 1967 that CBS finally found something that could compete: the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. Before that, even Judy Garland's show couldn't make a dent. But Blocker wasn't just playing a rancher. He became one, in a way. In 1963, while Bonanza was blowing up, he opened a real steakhouse. It was called the Bonanza Sirloin Pit. The first one was in Westport, Connecticut, inside an old Greyhound bus station from 1925. The idea worked. People knew the name. They trusted it. By 1966, 2 brothers, Sam and Charles Wiley, bought the brand and expanded it fast. Then, in 1965, 3 other guys started a similar chain in Indiana. They called it Ponderosa Steakhouse. Both brands kept growing until 1989, when Metro Media bought them. By then, Bonanza had around 600 restaurants. The 2 chains merged in 1997 but stayed under separate names. By 2019, only about 75 locations remained. Still, Blocker had turned TV fame into something real, into a business that people could walk into, sit down, and taste. His movie career kept moving, too. In 1963, he was in Come Blow Your Horn with Frank Sinatra. It was a Neil Simon comedy, and it worked. It made $12.7 million and was one of the top movies that year. Then, in 1968, Blocker and Sinatra teamed up again for Lady in Cement. This time, it was a crime thriller. Blocker played Rudy Kosterman, a dangerous businessman. The movie had that gritty, jazzy 1960s Miami vibe. Off-screen, there was something else people didn't see. During Bonanza's peak years, all 4 of Dan Blocker's kids took karate lessons from a man named Chuck Norris before he became famous. They trained alongside Michael Landon's children. The cast had become like family. Blocker had married Dolphia Parker back in 1952. They met in college and stayed together until his death in 1972. Their son David became a producer and won an Emmy in 1998. Dirk became an actor too. Blocker stayed close to his family. He didn't let fame change that. Mitch Vogel, who played Jamie on Bonanza, later said Dan was the kind of guy you could go and have a beer with. Dan Blocker was always seen as the friendly giant on TV. He played Hoss Cartwright in Bonanza, a role millions loved. But what people didn't see was how much he was quietly struggling. He stood 6'4" and weighed around 300. That size gave him a commanding presence on screen, but it also came with health risks. Before his death in May 1972, Dan had already begun showing signs of medical issues. He was having gallbladder problems, but those around him didn't realize how serious it was. Medical experts say that even though gallbladder surgeries today are quick and low risk, even for larger patients, things were very different back then. In 1972, the tools and techniques just weren't as advanced. Some believe that if he had the same surgery just 10 years later, he might have survived. But back then, his size made everything more dangerous. He kept all of it to himself. On screen, he smiled. Off-screen, he was fighting a quiet, losing battle. Just 2 months before his death, Dan had landed a new role that could have changed his whole career. Director Robert Altman, who had worked with him before, had picked Dan to play a lead role in The Long Goodbye. It was a tough part, a broken-down, alcoholic writer. Nothing like the kind-hearted Hoss. It was Dan's chance to show the world he could do more than just play the gentle cowboy. But fate didn't let that happen. After Dan passed away, The role went to Sterling Hayden. He did a great job, even improvising lines while actually drunk during filming. But Altman never got over losing Dan. He even thought about canceling the movie altogether. Instead, he kept going and added a tribute in the credits with special remembrance for Dan Blocker. That one line showed how much he meant to the people who worked with him. Dan Blocker died on May 13, 1972. It started as a simple surgery, a routine gallbladder operation. But things went wrong fast. After the procedure, Dan developed a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in his lungs. He couldn't breathe. Nurses rushed down the halls. A code blue rang out. Doctors tried everything to save him, but at 4:10 a.m., his heart stopped. He was only 43. His death hit hard. Fans were shocked. News reports spread across the country within hours. People couldn't believe it. His wife, Dolphia, was left with 4 children, twin daughters, Deborah and Dana, and 2 sons, David and Dirk. She also had to face the media storm. His funeral was held just 3 days later, and thousands showed up, friends, co-stars, strangers, everyone who had loved Hoss. Michael Landon gave a short speech that cut deep. He made us laugh. He made us better. Dan was buried in a small Texas cemetery, far from Hollywood, but never forgotten. Bonanza was already in its 13th season when Dan died. The show had been running for over a decade and was still doing well. But when Hoss died, it was like a hole opened in the center of the series. The ratings took a nosedive. People stopped watching. As producer Richard Collins said, "Just as we personally suffered a loss, so the audience suffered one too." The first episode of season 14 got good numbers, but only because people were curious. After that, viewership dropped by almost 40%. NBC blamed the drop partly on moving the show to Tuesday nights. But the truth was simpler. Fans missed Hoss. They didn't want to watch Bonanza without him. Even Lorne Greene, who played Ben Cartwright, admitted it. He told his wife, "That's it. It's finished." And he was right. NBC canceled the show in November. The last episode aired on January 16, 1973. After 14 seasons and 431 episodes, Bonanza was over. In the middle of O'Donnell, Texas, there's a quiet corner that still holds the memory of a man loved by millions. It's not a big city, and you could miss it if you weren't looking. But there, standing tall, is a bronze bust of Dan Blocker, the man the world knew as Hoss Cartwright. The memorial was unveiled on July 4, 1973, just 14 months after Dan passed away. He was only 43. The words carved on the plaque say it all. Thanks to film, Hoss Cartwright will live. But all too seldom does the world get to keep a Dan Blocker. The statue stands on land that used to be an empty lot. Years ago, it was next to his father Shaq Blocker's general store. Dan, known back then as Bobby Dan, used to help out there as a kid. Across the street is the old bank building that now holds the O'Donnell Heritage Museum. It still looks like it did in 1925. On the second floor, there's a whole room dedicated to Dan's life. From the time he was born, at a whopping 14 pounds, the biggest baby ever recorded in Bowie County, to his rise as one of America's favorite TV stars, every piece tells a part of his story. And as you drive into O'Donnell on Highway 87, a giant mural of him greets you, painted across the side of a barn like a proud reminder. This town raised a gentle giant. His son, Dennis Dirk Blocker, was born in Los Angeles on July 31, 1957. He was just a kid when he first stepped into the world of show business. He appeared in a car commercial with his dad at only 7 years old. Then everything changed. Dirk lost his father when he was just 14. But he didn't give up. 2 years later, he was already acting on television. His first appearance came in 1974 on Marcus Welby, MD. He was 16. By 19, he landed a regular role in the show Ba Ba Black Sheep. He played First Lieutenant Jerry Bragg from 1976 to 1978. From there, Dirk's career quietly grew. He appeared in Poltergeist in 1982, Starman in 1984, and classic shows like MASH and The X-Files. He even appeared in 2 Bonanza follow-up films, Bonanza: The Return and Bonanza: Under Attack, playing a reporter. But his biggest break came much later. At 56, he joined the cast of Brooklyn Nine-Nine as Detective Hitchcock. From 2013 to 2021, he was in 147 episodes. A whole new generation got to know him, not as Hoss's son, but as a brilliant comedy actor in his own right. Now at 66, Dirk has started to share what it was really like growing up as Dan Blocker's son. He remembers how his dad's fame followed them everywhere. Fans would mob them in public. That kind of attention made Dirk want something different. He never chased fame. He chose a quieter path, being a character actor, taking supporting roles, staying out of the spotlight. But even as he stepped back from center stage, he never stepped away from his father's shadow. It was always there, a mix of pride and pressure. He wanted to honor Dan's name, but also prove he could make it on his own. He's spoken about the strange feeling of seeing his father on TV, while also remembering the man who tucked him in at night. Few people grow up like that, watching the world love someone you miss every day. And when Dan died suddenly in 1972, everything changed. Dirk was just a teenager. The loss hit hard and stayed with him, shaping who he became. What stuck with Dirk the most were the values his father lived by. Dan Blocker wasn't just a TV star, he was a decent, humble man. The people on set didn't talk about his acting as much as they talked about how kind he was. He didn't act like a star, he acted like a good man who happened to be on TV. That honesty rubbed off on Dirk. He saw how his father balanced fame and family, how he stayed grounded even while playing one of the most famous roles on television.